In this episode of Learning to Love PlayStation, we pick up where we left off by heading straight into Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, as it was known here in the States. It released on November 2nd, 1999, just barely a year past the first game. Don't let that short development time fool you. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage takes the basic framework already established and satisfyingly fleshes out the core Spyro concepts into a much stronger, more rewarding experience. Spyro 2 is another nostalgic game for me. Not as much as the first one because, well, until I came to focus on the game for this video, I never actually beat it. I was really bad at this game as a kid and just never bothered to revisit it until now. Oh, and this game has analog control, as did Spyro 1, as many of you pointed out to me over the comment section of the last video and on Twitter. I guess I accidentally quit without saving my settings on the PS3 overlay last time, which led to my error. Oops. Moving on. Like last time, we'll kick off with an overview of the plot. Wanting to escape some poor weather, Spyro and Sparks decide to head to Dragon Shores for a little vacation time. Unbeknownst to them, an odd bunch in the land called Avalar are tampering with a portal, hoping to summon a dragon to their world. They tinker correctly, and Spyro finds himself in their company and not on the shores. So, let's get acquainted. There's Elora, a fawn who is sort of a leader, which is neat. There's Hunter, a dumb but lovable cheetah that has a chin-strap beard. Yeah. And there's the professor, who's voiced by SpongeBob. Oh, and Spyro is voiced by SpongeBob in this game too.
You got a problem with that pussycat?
Back to the matter at hand. We'll just ignore the flaws of Elora and friends' plans, such as, well, how do they know if a dragon will be flying through at that exact instant? No time to fall into a plot hole, because here comes Ripto and his Lankies. Gulp and crush! Ripto was also summoned to Avalar by Elora's squad, and he liked Avalar enough to proclaim himself the king, and so he took it over. Now, we never have any evidence that Ripto is a bad ruler, or that he has particularly hurt anyone. But he's the bad guy, so naturally we want to turn him to toast. So, Ripto destroys the portal that Spyro just came through, and runs off. Elora informs Spyro that they will only be able to get him home by collecting enough orbs to power a gate. She also tells him that he will need talismans from each of Avalar's realms to draw enough power to defeat Ripto. And with that, the MacGuffins we need to beat this game have been established. Also, gems are back. The plot then takes a backseat to the gameplay, and it really only peeps its head up around the game's 3 boss fights. Some cutscenes fill in the gaps of how Ripto came to Avalar and in general ruined life for our gang. Then the next major story point is that you beat up Ripto, and then the credits roll. Anyway, I've spent way too long talking about Spyro 2's story. It's a definite improvement over the first game, with characters that are charming. I'm particularly fond of Hunter, who is a total doofus.
No! You despicable little creature! I'll kill you!
This is bad news for Avalar. Hunter, why didn't you chase him?
Ripto as a villain, however, is really underbaked, but Spyro 2's strengths lie completely in its markedly enhanced gameplay structure. It's not the core mechanics that have changed. While charging, Spyro makes tighter turns, and he has a few new moves he has to unlock as he progresses, such as a head bash and the ability to climb ladders. There's also underwater gameplay sprinkled throughout, and honestly, it might be some of the best underwater control I've experienced in any platformer. It's a little loose and sometimes takes a couple tries to hit certain objects you want to hit, but it just feels so damn good. Really, Spyro in general just feels a little more fleshed out, but is largely the same. It's what you do in the levels themselves that have upped the ante. Gone is the basic enter level, collect gems and free dragons, beat baddies and leave setup, and instead is an objective-based system. You still collect gems in each level, and of course there are still enemies to contend with, but Spyro 2 feels way more varied than the first game. Each level has a short, charming intro cinematic that introduces the inhabitants of each world. These characters all have some sort of problem affecting them or their species, and the main end goal for these levels is to help resolve their plot. You might return water back to a seahorse kingdom, or turn on a giant bug zapper that will kill robotic bugs. In addition to that, each level has extra things to do which will award you even more orbs. These generally boil down to a minigame of some sort or collecting a certain number of a special object in each level. Ripto's Rage also introduces my favorite Spyro character,
Well,
Moneybags.
dragon or not, I'm afraid there is a small fee to open the bridge. It will cost you 100 of your gems to cross. Thank you, Mr. Dragon. Spyro, was it? You can now use the bridge whenever you want, free of charge. I hope we meet again, when you have even more gems.
Moneybags is the kind of character you really love to hate. In various levels, Moneybags will have a paywall in effect. You have to fork over your gems to progress with the stage. Moneybags is also how you unlock your extra moves. The ones I mentioned earlier? Yeah, you just fork over gems so he can smugly tell you to jump and press the triangle button to ram your head into the ground. What an asshole! Good news is, as long as you're looking around each level, you'll never be short on gems, and you get back everything you paid Moneybags at the end of the game. I love you, Moneybags! All these added gameplay structures make Spyro 2 feel like a more varied game. While surface level, you're really just doing the same thing throughout a large portion of the game, Ripto's Rage really makes itself feel like a varied experience, which is much appreciated. If you're a fan of how markedly lonely the first game felt, you may not like the tons of voiceover and hand-holding this game can exhibit, but any platforming fan should be able to appreciate what Ripto's Rage brings to the table. There's also little things to collect called skill points, which are kind of like an early day PS3 trophy system for doing certain tasks in game. They don't do anything but unlock a very lackluster epilogue, but the thought's nice, I guess. Really though, all in all, there wasn't a single level I didn't like. Except for one. Spyro 2 fans, just take a guess. Yeah, that's right, it's Fracture Hills. I really have to point out this level. There's a basic plot here that's simple enough. Giant rock monsters have encased the Satyrs' castle in stone, as well as the Satyrs themselves, for playing their music loudly. You free the Sixth, and they perform so loudly that they break the rock encasing their castle. It makes sense in the game, trust me. There's no big there. At first glance, the level seems really cool, with a split between the forest-like above ground and the lava-ridden stoneways below. It's this level's objectives that make me an angry video game nerd. One of them is using a super speed power-up to traverse a course and free a character from a stone door. Problem is that super speed sections are the only sections in the game where you don't feel completely in control. Often you'll find yourself veering off the path you're meant to be on, or bumping into a wall, or not sticking a jump you swore you should have been able to make. And if you do any of those things, you have to go all the way back to the supercharge gate and try again. Let's just add in that there's a skill point for doing 3 laps of this path. I spent a solid 20 minutes just trying to do that, and it was one of 2 frustrating parts in the game. The other frustrating part in the game was just a few feet over in the same level. There's this dude called the Alchemist. He tried a potion with Hunter that was supposed to turn into gold. It wound up getting Hunter's feet encased in stone. You have to lead the Alchemist to Hunter past all of the stone monsters that are waiting to squash the Alchemist. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, the Alchemist is basically an idiot and meanders all over the place. He has a set path, but it's just tough to protect him even when you basically have his pattern memorized. So you finally get him to Hunter, and he frees him with his new potion. Cool! You get an orb! Oh, Hunter has an orb to give you for completing a mission too! And...
Come back and meet me here when you've learned how to head bash, and we can kick some Earth-Shaper butt together.
Oh! By this point in the game, you don't have the head bash. You don't get it until the 3rd hub world. Fracture Hills is in the 2nd hub world. So later in the game, you get the ability to get the head bash and come back to Fracture Hills. Oh! Spyro 2's level plot lines reset once you leave them. So you have to free the Satyrs again and guide the Alchemist to Hunter again. Is this explanation tedious yet? Just wait till you get to it in the game. My total playtime for this game was about 10.5 hours. A full hour of that was spent in this madhouse of a level. Other than Fracture Hells, the other levels are actually pretty smartly designed. They're either divided into sections you progress through area to area, chunk by chunk, or are much more open, kind of like a playground where you're left to your own devices to navigate them effectively. There's a lot more vertically based progression in Spyro 2's levels than Spyro 1, which is pretty nice. And they nearly all play to Spyro's strengths, and you can consistently 100% most of these levels in about half an hour each. They're not so open that you'll get bored, but they're just complex enough to reward those who like to explore. Speedway levels are back from the first game and shine even stronger this time around. I didn't actually touch on these levels much in the first video, but they're basically timed courses where you have to destroy 4 sets of objects in a time limit. They are very satisfying to complete, and you can even get an orb from each of the 4 speedway stages via an additional objective. As you've probably noted by now, the game still looks like a PS1 game, but has a very striking color usage, much like the first game. Really, my compliments to the first game's visuals extend to this one. Very rarely do any levels feel like typical tropes. They're varied with unique characters in each and every one, which is nice. Stuart Copeland returns to do the music, and while I feel there aren't too many standout tracks, the game has a very consistent score and just feels Spyro. I mentioned earlier that there's only 3 boss fights, 1 for each of the 3 hub worlds. That may not sound like a lot, but I found it to be a decent amount. Now, in Spyro 1, boss fights were basically an additional stage that you occasionally hit a boss enemy within, and they would run to the next part of the stage where you would need to hit them again. This time around, boss fights are actual fights in arenas, and make good use of Spyro's combat abilities with decent patterns. I actually lost a few lives this go around, so kudos to Insomniac for stepping up their game in this area too. To wind things down, once you've gotten a certain number of gems and orbs in the post-game, you can go to Dragon Shores, which has a few silly minigame things like bursting balloons while going around in a trolley, or shooting a baseball at a target for a dunk tank. After beating these little side games, you get a cutscene viewer, which is a nice thought. And for 100%ing the game in general, you can visit Dragon Shores and get a permanent Super Fire Breath power-up, which makes the bosses ridiculously laughable. Yeah, fuck you, Ripto! That's all I have to say about Spyro 2. Yeah, I don't like Fractured Hills, but the fact that I spent so long talking about just one of the game's near 30 levels proves that there's not much to dislike about this game. I never felt bored. I always had that just one more level mentality. I always admired the game's charm and craft beginning to end, and frankly walked away liking this game much more than I did as a kid. Collecting every goodie in this game was very, very rewarding. If you haven't played Spyro, I still think you could safely start from the first game and work your way from there, but if you want to bypass those awkward baby steps, Spyro 2 is a fantastic game. Next time, I'll go over Spyro Year of the Dragon, the last Spyro game developed by Insomniac Games. Some people say Ripto's Rage is the best Spyro game, while some swear by Year of the Dragon, so I'm pretty excited to visit it and see how I feel. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Also, can I just mention how much I miss Big Head mode in video games?
Remember, do not underestimate the power of PlayStation.
Thanks for your help, Spyro. Please, take this. One of the monkeys had it. Were those monkeys or apes?